Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to our final session of this late afternoon or early evening. Really excited to introduce somebody that I think I've probably introduced before on a couple of occasions at events, Helen Cook, who I've known now for a few years as well. And a little known fact is we both went to the same university. And we're both energy angels as well. And this session called Standing Out for the Right Reasons is being headed up and led today by Helen Cook, who is CEO and founder of MyPlus, does some amazing work in her field. So please check out her website and social channels and find out some more about Helen and some of the things that she does. And she is going to be turning the spotlight on the skills and strengths your disability can bring. So again, Helen, thank you so much for joining today, and we're really excited and looking forward to your session. And over to you.
Thanks, Ash. I'm absolutely delighted to be joining you and everybody here this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to running this session as well. So as Ash said, my name's Helen Cook and I'm the CEO of MyPlus. And our mission is to ensure that having a disability doesn't prevent anyone from having the career that they want to have. And for the last 15 years, we've worked with employers, students and universities to make that a reality. And it's something that, as a wheelchair user, I'm particularly passionate about, as I've been fortunate enough to have had a very enjoyable career. So for the next hour, we're going to focus on the positives that having a disability can bring in terms of the skills and strengths and how we can positively position those with employers so that we stand out for the right reasons. And I'm delighted that I'm going to be joined by a number of people who are also going to talk about share their insights and expertise as well. So some people think that having a disability will hold them back. We tend to think about the things that you can't do or can no longer do or find difficult to do. But I think that that's a load of rubbish. And I believe that if you want to do something, you can. It might be challenging. However, it's all about finding your way around these. And I want to start by looking at just that. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I want to start by showing the Paralympic video from 2016. And as you watch this, I want you to, have a look at how people found a way around their disability to do the things that they wanted to do. I'm talking about playing the drums with your feet, playing sport in a wheelchair, picking up your baby when you haven't got any arms, or tap dancing with just one leg. So let's just start by having a look at this.
Yes, I can, certainly, yes, I can. Gee, I'm afraid to go on has turned into, yes, I can. Take a look, what do you see? I can do anything, yes, I can. Something that sings in my blood is telling me, yes, I can. 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 No, you can't. I can climb Everest. Yes, I can. I can find you in Mount Everest. Yes, I can. Stop music.
I would love to tell you that I was that person at the end of that video, but I'm not. So, let me just share my screen with you. So, just bear with me. There we go. So, as I said, I mean, what that video showed was just what people can do if they really set their mind to it. So in terms of what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be looking at disability in the workplace. And actually, as I said, how do we position our disability positively? So we're going to start by looking at it from an employer's perspective. Why do they ask this question that we sometimes see on application forms? We're going to hear some insights from people at Enterprise, starting with Ramina. We're going to look at this thorny subject of disclosure. And what are our concerns about being open about our disability? And we're also going to explore the benefits of being open and how we can do that. We're also going to then hear from Ben, another Enterprise employee, talking about his experiences, and then finishing off about how do we positively position your disability. And I'm going to be joined by Karen Coney from John Moore Liverpool University. Now, some of you on this call will have disabilities, and some of you won't. Some of you may know people. Some of you may just be interested, and that's absolutely brilliant, not least that you are the future leaders of tomorrow, and it's going to be, you know, up to people like you that's going to make a difference in the workplace, whether that's bringing in people or gender equality or indeed around disability equality. So absolutely chuffed to bits that you've joined us. So we're going to go through quite a lot today, and as Ash said, loads and loads of information, all freely available on our Students Club website, including lots of information about Enterprise and their approach to disability and the support that they offer. They do have a go, do go and have a look at that once we finish today. So I thought it was just worth by starting by reminding ourselves, what are we talking about when we talk about disability? It's a term that is an umbrella term for many, many conditions. Some are hidden, many are hidden, some are visible. Includes sensory, mobility, mental health, learning, developmental, progressive conditions. So I just thought it'd be worth sharing the legal definition. And this is the definition that was in the Disability Discrimination Act, now the Equality Act. And it says that a person has a disability if they have a physical or mental impairment which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. Now, I think that that's quite a narrow definition because we're talking about physical or mental. And hence I wanted to share another definition that many of my clients use, which talks about people with a physical, mental, intellectual, sensory difference, condition or impairment, which may impact their full participation and inclusion in society on an equal basis with others. Now, either way, I think those terms are quite ambiguous, they're quite fluffy. And I think that, first of all, disability is a very harsh label. We don't always want to identify with that disability. I remember, you know, it's not how I go around defining myself. First of all, I'm Helen. As I said, I'm a founder of a company. I'm a wife, a stepmom, a sister, a daughter. I'm a friend. I'm lots of things before I would describe myself as disabled. I think also that how our disability, is it our disability that impacts our ability to participate in society, or is it the societal barriers that are erected? And I also think we have to remember that we all manage our disability differently, and therefore it has a different impact on whether we can participate in society. So you may meet two wheelchair users, or two people with a visual impairment, or two people with dyslexia, and their abilities and strengths are very different because of when they were diagnosed, when they became disabled, the support they've had, and so on. And here are just a very few conditions. Now, when I've shown this on webinars before that we've run for students, people start putting in the chat box, and I have this is the disability. And I'm not going to go through that today because the list is too long. And I guess, you know, if you are asking yourself a question, you know, it's about, you know, does it impact my full participation in society? So now that we've provided a little bit of context around you know, what a disability is, let's move on to think about, you know, why does an employer ask you about this? So it's not surprising that we're quite concerned about sharing information around a disability or a health condition or poor mental health, because it's very personal information. Well, actually, we don't know the employer at this point. We're only making that application in. And we're going to be reluctant to provide that information if we don't know why it's being asked for. So I thought we'd start by a poll question. And I don't know whether Claire's on this or Nicole's on this to put the poll question in. Are you able to do that for me? Yes, we have. Fantastic. So our first poll that we've got before we move on to look at why employers are asking this question is, what percentage of students in UK universities have a disability? So if you want to select your answer, let's see what you're thinking. Is it 8%, 10.5%, 12%, 14 or 18%? Oh, it's quite close in some places. 18% is come out at top. It's actually 14%. It's 14%, not quite as high as 18, but 14% is still a really high figure. It's 1 in 7 of students have a disability in UK universities, an incredibly high figure. So it's very easy to think you're the only one, but in the nicest possible way, you're not, always say, you're not that special. But why does an employer ask that question? Well, very simply, it's because they want to level the playing field when it comes to the recruitment process. They want to ensure that nobody's at an advantage, but equally no one's at a disadvantage. And I love this graphic here and this quote from Albert Einstein that says, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So it's about leveling the playing field and giving everybody the same opportunity, or a fair opportunity. It's about ensuring that you as the candidate can perform to the best of your ability. And then once that adjustment's in place, that change has been made to the process, that support's there for you, you will then be assessed on an equal basis to your peers, and that's the responsibility of the employer. So what does the employer ask? Well, there's two things that the employer may ask. First of all, on the application form, they may ask, what support do you require? And I said that's about ensuring that they know what it is that you need so that you can demonstrate your potential. Because otherwise you're potentially going to hit a barrier. You might not have enough time. The font might not be large enough. You may not have an interpreter in place for you. And therefore you're going to be rejected for a role that you're capable of doing. And they ask you that to ensure that their process is inclusive. Now, what they may also send you is an equal opportunities form. And that's the form where they ask you, do you have a disability? And at that point, it's about understanding the diversity of their employee population. They want to understand if they're inclusive, if their policies and processes are fit for purpose, and they ask you for reporting reasons. Now, that information is totally confidential. It doesn't go to the recruiters, it doesn't go to the hiring managers. And I think Karen's going to talk about this in a minute, is that if you put on an equal opportunities form, yes, you have a disability, that won't be sufficient to put your adjustments in place, because it is, as I said, it doesn't go to the recruitment team. You have to ask for that information separately to that. So how is the information used that you share? Well, I think it's really, really important, first of all, to remember that it is confidential. As I said, it's only shared outside of the graduate recruitment team if you give permission. So this is about the adjustments. It's not shared with hiring managers, and it's not shared with other candidates. So if you're somebody who has 25% extra time, or if you've shared that you experience anxiety and may need rest breaks, no one else is going to know that other than the person that you've been talking to in the recruitment team. It's not their role to pass that on unless you've said, actually, I'd like that information to be shared. It's certainly not used to assess you for the suitability for the role. It won't be used to provide support for you if you're successful. That will be another conversation. But it may be used for reporting purposes. Again, your name won't be attached to it, but what companies tend to do is have a look at actually how many applicants do we have that require support, you know, how many people go through the process, how many offers do we make, how many people accept those offers. So it may be used for reporting purposes, but that's all confidential and used within, reported in line with data privacy. So that's a little bit about why employers ask me in the nicest possible way. They're not really interested in the ins and outs of your disability. They're not medics. What they want to do is they want to know how to support you. And I'd just like to invite both Nicole from Enterprise and Karen to come in now. I think you're going to turn your cameras on. And Nicole, if we could perhaps start with you to sort of just say a little bit more from Enterprise perspective and why you asked the question and how that information is used.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I think, you know, just to go through the interview process, first of all, at Enterprise, just to run through it, and we will ask you to complete an online application. From there, if you're successful, we'll invite you to phone screen. Following from that, you would be invited to a virtual interview with someone from the recruitment team. And if you're successful at that stage, then we invite you to do a branch interview where you get to meet the team face to face. So at every stage of that interview process, we will ask you if you need support. And I can't encourage you enough to take us up on that offer because it's only going to benefit you. And another thing I think is really important, you know, Helen, you mentioned we're not medics, you know, we're working on a recruitment team. You are the expert in your disability. So it's actually better, even if you are a bit shy and hesitant about disclosing your disability, it's in your best interest to do that because it will help you come through the process with us, and we will allow you to avail of those supports or even adjustments through the interview process. And I think you're only going to benefit yourself if you tell us. And another thing is it's in our best interest for you to get the job as well. You know, us as a recruitment team, we really want to bring forward the best talent. So the more you tell us about the support or adjustments you need, the better you'll do in the process.
That's lovely, Nicole. Thank you. Really good advice there. And Karen, would you like to come in here as well?
Yes, and just really to agree. First of all, Helen, with what you were saying, I do speak to students in my role as a careers advisor who think they have disclosed to an employer, but actually what it turns out is that they've completed that equal ops form that you mentioned as part of the recruitment process, and they've then expected that everyone that they then meet in that sort of employer organization then knows. So it's very helpful to note that isn't necessarily passed on. And secondly, to echo so what Nicole was saying, actually, that it's helpful to just understand that employers they're usually really eager to support you, but they don't necessarily know anything or very much about your disability or health condition. So you are the expert, and it's really helpful if you can then articulate sort of how it's going to affect you and what you need. and that will help an employer. So they do need guidance from you, and you may be sat there thinking, actually, I don't know exactly what I will need in the workplace. I've not been in that particular environment, and that is something definitely to do what you can to find out. So what I'm often encouraging students to do is seek relevant voluntary work, get some sort of part-time work, some summer work, placements, take the opportunity to kind of get experience, because during those times you will then sort of start to learn what it is that's going to be helpful for you in the workplace in terms of adjustments that will be needed. But I'm going to be encouraging you to seek support later on, but that's something else. You're not on your own doing this either, but we'll come back to that later.
Thank you. And I think it's interesting, both Nicole and Karen said the same thing, which is about you've got to become an expert in what you require. It's not always easy, but I think we all encourage you to do that. So thank you. And before we now move on to talk about a bit more about disclosure and openness, I would like to invite Romina to join us now, who is going to share her first-hand experience of disability and life at Enterprise. Romina, over to you.
Thanks so much, Helen. So hi everybody, my name is Romina. I have been with Enterprise for 3 years now. I'm currently an account supervisor for them, and that's after having worked my way up through the ranks. I did start on the graduate program just like everybody else. First of all, let's just take note that graduating is a very stressful time for everybody. I only finished college a few years ago, so I remember very well how stressful of a time it was to start making big life decisions and start looking into a career path. So I definitely sympathize with everyone there. For me, though, it was a bit more tricky. You know, it's a stressful time as it is, but if we try adding into the fact that I am a woman and I am a woman with a disability, things for me, time seems a lot more complicated. To give you a bit of background, I am a full-time wheelchair user. I have been most of my life, following an accident when I was 3 and I broke my back. So to me, it was all I'd ever really known. And growing up, just given the support system that I had both at home and in schools, I never realized that I was different. It wasn't until I got into college and I started looking at careers that I realized that, you know, things weren't going to be as easy as I had really thought they were. And that kind of all started back when I was in school and looking into colleges. You know, the thought of careers came up and what degree I wanted to do and what path I wanted to go down. And that kind of changed throughout the years. So I actually ended up studying finance in college, and very early on realized that I didn't really like finance, as a lot of people do halfway through their degrees, and switched majors then. And I ended up finishing that degree in finance and doing a master's in sociology. So following that, I kind of started looking at where I wanted my career to go. And one thing for me was I knew I didn't want to be stuck behind a computer. I'm very much a people person and I like interacting with people. So I wanted a job where I could do that. So, you know, sitting in a cubicle in an office doing 9 to 5, I just knew would never suit me. The problem that I found with that was that if you're not behind a computer desk, you are out there representing the company that you're working for, and you are the face of the company. And, you know, we have the hashtag today, choose to challenge. What I found, and unknowingly at the time, was I challenged the perception of what the face of a company should be. You know, when we look at companies, what we think of initially is a middle-aged white man in a suit. That's who's out there representing companies. And it got me thinking that I couldn't, to be quite honest. But as I kind of went through it, I started challenging that. And I started thinking, well, why couldn't I? Why couldn't, you know, an Asian woman be representing the company? Why couldn't a woman in a wheelchair be the face of the company that's out there and put out to the public? And, you know, that kind of, all those thoughts kind of led me to want to progress and want to be successful in my career, but I wanted a chance. So as Helen was talking, sometimes people don't always disclose on their CVs or in their applications. And unfortunately, I was one of those people. If I could turn back time, you know, I've grown a lot since then and I've changed how I look at things. I probably would disclose it because I think it would have made the application process a lot easier for me. But I was one of those people that didn't disclose it on their CV. And back then it was harder to you know, keep that quiet because you had to do in-person interviews, whereas now, I'm not saying you should, but you could get away with completely not disclosing that you have a very physical disability. Definitely don't suggest it though, and don't advise it. But for me, it was very much, I wanted to be judged on my academics and my experience, not the fact that I was in a wheelchair. And what I started seeing after, you know, sending out multiple applications and CVs was that there was this pattern kind of emerging where I'd send in an application on my CV. They'd love my CV, love my experience, my education. I'd do the phone interview. Phone interviews would go great. They loved me. I loved them. We were a great match. And then the in-person interview would happen. And many a times I would get to the interview and I instantly could see it on their face that I just didn't have that job. And that was purely based on the fact that they saw the chair and just dismissed me off the bat. And I actually have a very funny, I would want to say, example of that, where I went in for an interview for a company. Role would suit me great. I definitely had the experience, had the background and education for it. But my interviewer spent almost an hour talking to me about this guy he knew that did adapted skiing. I was never asked about my education. I was never asked about my experience. And it really kind of drilled in the fact that this man just didn't see me as a viable candidate, even though I was ticking all the boxes he was looking for.
Sorry, Romina, I'm just going to have to stop you in about a minute.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. But you know, eventually I ended up finding Enterprise, and the way I found it was that one of my friends applied and he actually ended up not getting the role, but I ended up getting into the program. And the one thing that really stood out to me was from the very get-go of the application, it was never, you know, what obstacles do you have? What, you know, how is this going to be difficult for you? My first interview was purely based on experience and academics. And it was only after my job offer came in that we kind of started looking at, okay, well, what kind of support do you need? I think the way that question is phrased to candidates makes all the difference. Be it, you know, they need to know that you are there to offer them support, not to look at ways that they were going to be hindered. And for me, they were very small supports. They were ramps in branches and, you know, having hand controls in for cars because it is a requirement of the job. And with the right support, I ended up progressing. And, you know, having that support there from Enterprise meant that within my first year, I was promoted. 6 months after that, I ended up making assistant manager in one of our biggest branches. And then 8 months after that, I ended up in my current role. And earlier on, you know, we were talking about sitting at the table, and it was actually Cheryl. Yeah.
I'm really conscious of time. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you just to finish off. We're really tight on time.
Yeah, no. I'll finish with this then, Helen. Earlier on, we were talking about sitting at the table. And when initially that quote was said by Sheryl Sandberg in her Forbes interview, it was about women sitting at the table with men. But I do think we need to emphasize that that quote can apply to any aspect. You know, in whatever way you might be different, I think it's important for you to have the courage to get that seat at the table with the men or with the company that you want, and really believe in your skills and what you can bring to that table. And, you know, if you have a wheelchair, it's even easier because you don't need to find a spare seat. So, but I think it's all about believing in yourself and the perception you have of yourself and putting that out there to your employers or your potential employers.
Romina, thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off. We hopefully will have time at the end of the Q&A, but I am going to move on. But thank you very much. And as I said, hopefully we'll have time for the Q&A at the end.
Thanks so much, Helen.
Thank you. It's really, really good to hear from Romina and actually all of them about the whole sort of issues of support, and Romina talking there about disclosure, which brings us nicely on to what we're going to talk about next. Now, we talked about sort of why an employer asks this question about, do you have a disability? So now let's think about, you know, are you going to be open or not? And before you make that decision, I think we need to consider the benefits of that and indeed the consequences of not. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like this term disclosure. I think it makes it sound like we've got this terrible secret we're all keeping from each other. And therefore, I'm going to talk more about openness. I'm going to talk about sharing information or informing or telling people, as opposed to disclosing and declaration, which, as I said, I don't think is helpful. Now, I think if I asked you whether you were concerned about being open, I would expect that you would say that you were. And if you are, you'll have many reasons about why you don't want to be open with an employer. And I'm quite interested to hear what those questions, what those fears are. So we're going to go to our second question. And it says, why don't you want to tell an employer that you have a disability or health condition? Lots of reasons there: fear of discrimination, fear of judgment, being a hassle, afraid that you'll be seen as a weaker candidate, perhaps you don't need any adjustments, you don't know what you should share, or indeed all of the above. So again, if you want to submit your answers, why don't you want to be concerned? Why don't you want to share that information? Do we have the results of that coming in yet? Interesting. Gosh, interesting. 25% of you said all of the above. Concern that you'll be seen as a hassle, totally get it. You're asking for something that nobody else is asking for. And the one that really upsets me is that you're afraid that you're going to be seen as a weaker candidate. And that's why it's so important to be able to position our disability positively, which is what we're going to come on to. But not surprisingly, 76% of students don't want to be open about their disability. That's a figure that we found out when we did some research a few years ago, and that's an awful lot of fear. And the reasons that people don't want to be open are many and varied. All of the ones that are coming up, and many more as well. A lot of you said, I don't want to cause a fuss or a hassle. It's very easy to think you're the only one asking for something that's different. But let's go back to that 14%, 1 in 7 people have a disability and will be asking for support. And again, being afraid about how you're going to be perceived and the judgments. Now, I always say it's not for me to tell you whether to be open or not. That's not my role. But before you decide, and some people say to me, I don't want to be open about my disability, that you're not going to be open, I think it's important that we understand both the benefits of being open and equally the consequences that aren't. So at least you're making an informed decision. So what are the benefits? What are the benefits of being open with an employer about your disability, about the fact that you need support? Well, the big one for me is you can request the adjustments that you need. Otherwise, as I said, potentially you're going to hit a barrier in that process and be rejected. Obviously, your relationship with a potential employer is open and honest from the beginning, and that's what we all want. It allows you to demonstrate your full potential. You can draw on your disability to demonstrate your skills and competencies. For example, if it's a hidden disability, let's say you've experienced anxiety and depression. Let's say you've had a period of poor mental health. There's a hell of a lot of resilience that you will have developed to have dealt with your situation. There's an awful lot of determination to get back on your feet, and indeed tenacity to be applying for jobs. And actually we can talk about those and bring in examples that are unique to us and our disability if we're being open. I think if you choose to be open, you can control, you can manage what it is you say and how you say it and when you say it, because if not, sometimes we all say things, don't we? When we don't mean to say it. Oh, I didn't mean to say it like that. Or I didn't mean to tell you then. And actually, if we choose to be open, we're much more in control. And the last one for me is about being your authentic self, about not hiding any part of you. And that was something that Hayley Bennett talked about as our opening speaker today, and the importance of that. So those are the benefits of being open, and the consequences of not, I guess, polar opposite of that. You may lack the support adjustments you need, and therefore you're potentially going to be filtered out of that process quite early. You could cause unnecessary disruptions in the process. So actually, if you have a late request for adjustments, you may delay or cause your interview or assessment to be postponed. And actually, your lack of planning may reflect poorly on you, particularly if that employer has given you, as Nicole said, every opportunity to be open. and potentially it could impact your relationship with an employer negatively. Again, by not sharing that information and asking for what you need up front. As I said, it's not for me to tell you what to do. Personally, I would always be open if I needed support or adjustments. I might not put it on my CV because is it relevant? No, it's not. But I would always be open before I got to the interview, because I think personally, I think sometimes disability isn't what an interviewer is expecting, and we can take them off by surprise, and suddenly they're concentrating on us rather than interviewing us for the job. So I am going to stop there again, and I'm going to hand over to Ben. So Ben is another employee of at Enterprise, and he's also going to share his experiences of disability and working at Enterprise. So Ben, over to you.
Well, thanks, Helen. Yeah, so I'm Ben. I work at Enterprise as an assistant branch manager. I've been in the company since June 2018, and I've been an assistant branch manager for 18 months now. A little bit about me. I just moved into my own place, got engaged, and found out I've got a baby on the way in very, very quick succession. So it's been an exciting 12 months and hopefully only going to improve. Now, I fall into the category of invisible disabilities. My disability does become visible, but not all the time. So I've got a bone condition in my legs called Perthes disease, which is a femoral head condition, which basically the bone dies and disintegrates. Now that's been going on since I was 5 years old. So that's constantly been a part of my life. I've adapted to it, my family have adapted to it, so on and so forth. Work-wise, I've declared it always, absolutely all the time. So whenever it says, have you got any disabilities? I always tick yes. The proof that the company don't even know about that, from what obviously was being said earlier, that it's not disclosed to the company, it is for data. No one ever knows. So until something actually happens where I need to speak to them about it, no one's aware of what's going on, what's happening, anything like that at all. It all came to a head again recently this year when I ended up going to hospital and having scans done. Felt a bit of pain in my hip and my pelvis, and it turns out that the arthritis has disintegrated my joint basically. So I'm now on the waiting list for a hip replacement. Scary at 25, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be a straightforward time, but at the same time, I count myself as lucky. I've had 20 years where the treatment they did has helped me and it's worked. And I've been able to live those 20 years in a good way. I've had a good time. I've done my Duke of Edinburgh awards. I've gone to award evenings. I've done things with scouts. I've done days out, theme parks. Don't go on the rides because I'm scared of those, but that's irrelevant. So yeah, I've been really lucky and I've had a lot of things which I can do. You know, my gold Duke of Edinburgh, my silver, I actually did in my wheelchair because I had a bit of an episode where I couldn't actually walk. But that sort of brings on to the next point where they call it disabled, but I don't, because you're not disabled, you're differently abled. And there's always a way to get around the situation. So I sat in the doctor's room at my consultant and said, so this injection you're on about giving me to kill the pain and that kind of thing, if I have it, can I do my walk and do my Duke of Edinburgh? He said no. He said, if you go and do that walk, don't come back. And that hurt a lot. 12 months of hard work, dedication, training, and you can't do anything about it. Like, it just goes right in front of your eyes. But you find another way. We found a company down in the Forest of Dean who did it with other people and people who are also differently abled like myself. And you actually learn that as a team, I couldn't walk, but they weren't always necessarily mentally capable. So between us, we formed a unit and we became a team. And that was so great. Like, everything was fantastic. So in regards to Enterprise for myself, Enterprise didn't really know about my condition. They knew that I had a disability because I sort of spoke about it a little bit, but I never actually had to deal with it until this year. They've been fantastic, absolutely incredible. I turned around to my area manager, explained what was going on, told my branch manager, great reaction. They just said, anything you need, just let us know. But from my point of view, because I'm still doing everything as normal, I didn't need any other adaptations at the moment. I just sort of said, look, right now, I'm having the scans, I don't really know, but I may need a period in the end where I'm working from home. Other than that, I'll be here. I might be struggling to drive, I might be struggling to wash cars and go in the wash bay and go outside and serve customers and so on and so forth. But I'll be here, I'll do my job, I'll be here 9 till 5, I'll do everything I need to do. Sorry, 8 till 5, we don't open at 9, we open at 8. But yeah, so I'm there every single day, open up, locking up, everything. But it's just about how you view your disability and making sure that you view it positively and take it as almost like a gift, because you've learned, like Helen was saying, a different way to do things, and your resilience and your determination and tenacity and everything you learn helps you with every other aspect of life. I'll never forget the one story that I found out from when I was younger, when I was in a wheelchair and we were in a shop. I think it might have actually been like Asda or Tesco or something like that. It was a supermarket. And the lady at the till turned around to my mum and said, does your son want a lollipop? Just because I can't walk doesn't mean I can't talk or speak or think. My mum actually turned around to him and said, ask him yourself. He's 8 years old, he can do what he wants. So yeah, I mean, I'll leave you with the thought again. You're not disabled, you're differently abled, and look at the positives you've learned and how much you can do to help other people. And you'll have so many stories and so many brilliant icebreakers that you can use at business meetings and companies, and everyone always starts with an icebreaker. So just remember your stories and make sure you use them to the best of your ability. And thank you.
Ben, thank you so much. Some really powerful words there, some really powerful advice. I think you can see the comments that are coming in. Thank you very much, and congratulations as well. What a great year for you. And Ben's actually sort of brought us very nicely into the final formal session of this, where we're going to talk about positively positioning our disability. And I said at the beginning that, you know, I think that with disability, we often think about the things we can't do or can no longer do, rather than the skills and the strengths that having a disability brings, which is what, you know, what Ben's just talked about. And I always say, I guess this is the very premise of what My Plus is about, is that I don't believe that I'm any more special than anyone else, but I do believe it's given me something extra, and that's the plus. And these are the skills and the strength that I've had to develop, like Ben has and like Romina has, to manage my disability on a day-to-day basis in a world that's not always geared up for it. So I've had to be determined to overcome barriers. I've had to problem solve to get around the daily challenges of access and lifts not working, to be able to communicate and be articulate, particularly when I'm asking people to do things that I can't do, and also those interpersonal skills to build those relationships. And I'm sure you'll agree that when we look at any job description, these are exactly the skills that employers are asking for. So I'm now delighted to hand over to Karen, and Karen's going to talk to you more about this. So Karen, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to get my slides into presenter mode. Here we go. Hopefully that's fine. So yes, just a few bits about positively positioning your disability. And it's fantastic to be coming straight after Ben and Rowena, and just how they've done a fantastic job of doing that already. So just to pull some of it together, really. First of all, a question that I often get asked when I'm supporting students and graduates with disabilities. I quite liked what Ben said then about, I'm not sure about the term disability either, and I do prefer differently abled. I really like that. So what information should you share with an employer? Well, first of all, and this is what just to kind of confirm what we've already been alluding to, is just actually employers are just interested in getting the best person for the job. So focus on what is relevant for that job. What are they looking for? And kind of related to that is avoid, you know, so most people wouldn't do this, but sometimes when there's a worry around your condition or disability, then it can end up mentioning or focusing on that rather than on the requirements for the job. Now, an employer tends to give you what they're looking for in what's called the person specification. So as well as the job description, which outlines what you might do, most of the time there's a person specification where they highlight exactly what skills, qualities, experience and education they're looking for. So this is the kind of what to use as your focus. And when it comes to actually, if you're mentioning your disability at any stage of the recruitment process, like Helen said, I think a CV, it normally wouldn't be there, but it might be in a covering letter or an application form or before an interview and so on. It is really helpful to kind of give suggestions as mentioned. But what I really, really want to focus on now is thinking about how your disability or health condition actually can enhance what you have to offer. And I really like these two quotes I'm going to share with you now. One of them, I got this online, it was at the CV store. Lee Tung had said, a disability shouldn't define you as a candidate, but instead help differentiate and possibly even promote you as a candidate. So this idea actually, just going on what Helen said as well, what have you got because of your disability? What qualities have you developed? What skills have been honed as you've been dealing with perhaps the challenges or whatever's been involved? And here's another quote by someone with cerebral palsy. Dear employer, I have a disability. It doesn't completely define me. It just enhances me in a way which differentiates me and strengthens me. My disability should be viewed as an ability to see the world in a different way. And I think increasingly employers are starting to recognize that this diversity and the viewpoints and the different strengths and skills that people with health conditions and disabilities can bring, they're really valuable for the workplace. But I think they still need pointing out. And this is where it is important to think, what do you have to offer? Now, skills and strengths are very similar. We tend to define skills as those things that you are good at and perhaps have developed over time, whereas strengths might be elements that you were born with as well. So they tend to be differentiated in that way, but are sometimes used interchangeably. But here are a couple of examples of people who have a disability and they've used it to define what skills and strengths they have. So I will read this out because it's quite a lot of writing. Having dyslexia has taught me to develop innovative organizational and time management skills to assist with my short-term memory recall and forward planning. In addition to the skills and qualities I've already outlined, my own experiences of dyslexia will enable me to empathize with dyslexic pupils, as well as providing students with a positive role model. So I've highlighted some of the key points there. And you'll notice that this student has actually said, well, in addition to all the other things where I didn't mention my disability, I also have these that are because of my disability. So it's kind of part of what you bring, but it brings you that additional kind of edge, you know, something that makes you stand out. And here's another example. Because of my hearing loss, I've developed excellent levels of concentration. This is demonstrated my ability to analyze spreadsheets and make performance-related forecasts. I'm really pleased with the positive feedback I have received about these levels of focus in the workplace. So I would suggest that the next thing for you to do is to think, what do you have to offer because of your disability? So just in summary, it's really important you think, what is that employer looking for? They have given you all that you need to know in the person specification for a particular job. So think about how you meet each of the criteria. Some of the points will be nothing to do with your disability and will be based on the work experience you've gained, the degree you've studied, the volunteering you've done, or perhaps some natural kind of skills and strengths that you have. But some of them may be related to, you know, that you've shown resilience, determination, and so on because of your disability. I would next say it's not enough just to kind of write it all down. It's really important to get used to saying it out loud. Most individuals need to practice, and I would say it's particularly helpful to do that so that when you do meet an employer, whether that's virtually or face-to-face, you are ready to talk about what you have to offer. And just to highlight, you are not here to do this on your own. You don't have to. it's really good to think about the support that you can get for sort of selling yourself and considering sort of how to describe your disability to employers. So Helen's already mentioned the MyPlus, where there's free support on her website. Definitely worth signing up with that. And also worth noting that there are, at every university in this country, there is a careers and employability centre or service, and they are eager to support you on a one-to-one basis, or you can engage with a lot of their other activities as part of groups. And many, or I would say almost all, would support graduates as well. So if you're a graduate listening to this, it's worth remembering that and getting in touch too. I'm going to stop sharing now and pass back to Helen.
Lovely, Karen. Thank you. Thank you ever so much. And just really interesting, listening to some of the things that you said, because I absolutely concur with them, and particularly when you talked about practice articulating your strengths. I think that writing that sort of strength statement and ending up with something that you're really happy with makes it much easier to share those skills and strengths in a way that you want to with an employer. So absolutely, sort of share that as much as possible. Now we are we have got time now to go into a Q&A, and I'm going to be joined by all of the people who have spoken. So Nicole, Karen, Romina, and Ben. So if you would, I don't think we've got any questions that have come in during this session, but if you do have any questions that you would like to put into the chat, then please do so now. We'll get through as many of those as possible. But I thought I was just interested to start off by asking Ben and Romina what support and adjustments they specifically had from Enterprise. If you could just briefly describe sort of what you've benefited from, that would be brilliant. So Ben, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I mean, as I explained, as such, I'm lucky in the sense that a lot of the time at the moment I can manage it without any kind of adaptations. But I've got a risk assessment in place. We have to. It's in there that I can't drive certain vehicles, can't drive for long distances, can't be working in cold environments, can't go in certain areas because of trip hazards. So it's more the safety side from my point of view, and having that knowledge from managers and other like senior leadership that sometimes you need to get up and have a walk around. It's not because you're trying to avoid doing work, but it's because you're getting stiff and you can't actually sit any longer. But that's pretty much it for mine. Mine's quite straightforward.
Ben, I think we probably all could benefit from getting up and moving around a bit more, getting away from that screen. So good, thank you. Romina, what about yourself?
See, mine being a physical disability, there was a bit more kind of to it. So when I first started, it was kind of working out the local branch, which is where I was starting. It was putting in, new ramps, and they were small ramps. It was just more so to get over lift doors. We had automatic doors installed into the branch, so for ease more so than anything. We had hand controls brought in that would be moved from car to car in under 10 minutes. I have even moved them from car to car myself, so they're very easy to pop on and off of cars, which is handy because given the nature of the job, we do jump in and out of cars quite a lot. Then when I moved up to head office, there wasn't much adjustments there. The only thing I think we had was put in a fire plan for me. So I had an assigned person in case there ever was a fire, because we are on the first floor of a building. But that was kind of it for adjustments. They were all small things, but for a full-time wheelchair user, they were things that definitely made life easier and more practical.
Gosh, Romina, thank you. And total respect. I don't think I'd ever put hand controllers on my car. I always leave that to the experts.
I'm a pro at this point.
Nicole, can I ask you, could you give us some other examples of the types of support that perhaps you put in place for applicants? I think it's very easy. We often know about extra time, but could you give us a couple of other examples of perhaps what you've done? So it's a bit more more?
Yeah. One that springs to mind is I had a candidate that had a stutter, and when we done the face-to-face competency-based interview, he definitely struggled through the interview process, and those kind of competency-based questions just didn't suit him as a person. I just thought, I'm not trying to bring out the best in him. He got too nervous and couldn't answer the questions. So we changed the interview process and we made it a more of a engagement shadow opportunity where we done role plays and judged him based off how he interacted with customers, how he interacted with the team, and hired him in the end, you know, and he done very, very well. And recently I've had another guy where the same disability, had got a stammer, and before doing the interview with myself, I gave him an idea of the questions that I would be asking him. But I think, again, going back to, you know, you need to be able to let us know how we can support you. So there are things that I came up with, you know, myself. But I think if you're going to think about your disability and how, you know, you're going to manage throughout the interview process, and you come up with an idea, don't hesitate to say that idea to us, and we will definitely change up the interview process to bring out the best in you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. Karen, I'm going to come to you next with a question that's come in, and Christian's asking, when it comes to my disability, I understand that I shouldn't necessarily focus on it during an interview, but anyway, to perhaps highlight some of the skills that come from, you know, his experiences. And I would say yes, absolutely, so long as we don't use our disability to answer every question in the same way that we would use our Duke of Edinburgh or our captain of a football team. But what would you say?
Yes, I would completely agree with that. I can see, Christian, that you've mentioned that that actually your disability enhanced many of your skills, and that is the bit that employers would really like to hear about. So how has it enhanced your skills, and in what way, and how is that relevant to the job? So when they ask questions, so for example, what will you bring to this job, you could highlight them, and just in what way they would help. Particularly if you're familiar with the job description, you can tie in those skills to how it would enable you to do better in that particular role. So certainly I would say it will help you to stand out if you do answer you know, sort of one or even more than one question using how the depression has helped you in that way. But as Helen says, it's one of many things that you might bring. It isn't what you are all about. It's just something that would help you to stand out. And I'm sure there are other things as well. So it's getting that balance. But certainly yes is the answer. You can mention it, please. I think it would be a good thing too.
Thanks, Karen. Nicole, I'm going to finish off the last question to you. This is a really interesting one, which I'd love to ask all of you in the interest of time. This person is saying, I'm just curious to hear what employers think about in terms of candidates with disabilities. And you've asked about Catherine's asked about invisible. This person's been advised not to mention it because perhaps they'll be seen as unreliable or reduce their salary. Personally, I think that we should talk about it and use it as a strength. And equally, if an employer acts like that, then you know that you don't want to work for them. But what would you say? What would you say, Nicole?
Yeah, I think, you know, I do appreciate that there's a big anxiety around disclosing your disability, and I really do get that. But I can assure you, and I can't stress it enough, that you will benefit from telling us about your disability. And, you know, obviously I'm biased because I work for Enterprise, but everyone that I work with on the recruitment team, they're really, really nice people. And they're very approachable people. So they will be able to help you along the way. And for me, I'm just so passionate about hiring graduates with disabilities. And I really enjoy the process of, for example, making adjustments or offering additional supports. So for me, I know it's easier said than done, but I do think disclose and have a conversation. And then, you know, not that it will be forgotten about, but then we can move on from there after we've realized what kind of supports that you need. Does that answer the question, Helen?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. It is, as we've all recognised today, a really difficult topic, and people's fears are very real. I'm going to have to finish off now, just in terms of time, but I hope that everybody has found that really interesting. And I would particularly like to thank our others that have spoken in this session, our panelists, so to Karen, Nicole, Ben, and Ramina. I really appreciate your insights. It's been really, really useful. Lots and lots of information, all freely available on the Students' Club website, including some career guidance ebooks around both disclosure and positioning your disability as positively. So please do have a look at those.